Disney presents from Fantasyland, I captured the king of the leprechauns.
What deceitful trickery are you up to now?
Good evening, Your Honor. I brought Mr. Disney to see you, sir.
Disney? I've heard of the Dailies, the Duffys, the Donovans, the Devlins, the Dardys, but Disney, no. I don't know any Disney, so good night, sir.
And now, your Disneyland host, Walt Disney.
Some time ago, I decided to make an Irish picture, for Ireland is the home of the leprechaun, and the little people have always fascinated me. Well, when the story finally took shape and we were facing the problems of production, I felt I should talk the whole thing over with one of my Irish friends. Now, there's nobody more Irish than Pat O'Brien.
Have you ever been to Ireland, Walt?
No, I never have.
Well, I've been all over Ireland. Dublin, Cork, Tralee. Oh, gee, it's a grand country. Awfully poor, though. See, they've never had any iron or coal for export, but they've got one great commodity they've sent all over the world.
What's that?
Men, Walt, my lad. Fine, upstanding men. And women, too. Do you realize, Walt, the great contributions they've made to this country alone? Did you know that 11 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Irish?
No, I didn't.
Well, it's true. Now, you take my family, for instance. I have a distant cousin, Pat O'Brien. Oh, and I've got a lot of cousins, Pat O'Brien. This fellow lives in the Argentine. His name is Patricio O'Brien. Then I've got a great uncle, Uncle Michael. He's a Polish nobleman. That's right, he lives in Paris now. Count Obrinsky. Well, that's enough about the O'Briens. What kind of picture are you going to make?
Well, this is going to be about the little people.
Oh, Walt. Don't be meddling with the leprechauns. They're not the seven dwarfs, you know. It's only an Irishman that can handle them.
Well, I'm half Irish.
Yeah. What half?
Well, I kick with my left leg.
Oh, glory be. St. Finian, the squint-eyed. Don't let Ireland hear about it. You won't have a leg to stand on.
Well, I won't let it get out. Pat, you're full Irish, so I thought you could tell me about these little people.
What would you like to know?
Well, there's been a lot of quibbling about just, what they really look like.
There's one looking at you right now.
Where?
Over there with my collection of shillelaghs. You know, Walt, my grandmother taught me a song years ago, many years ago. And you can learn more about leprechauns from this than you can from all the highfalutin books in the world. It goes to this old tune. In a shady glade one moonlight night, a leprechaun I spied, with scarlet cap and coat of green, and a jug of poteen by his side. Tick-tack, his hammer went upon a tiny shoe, and I laughed to think of his crack of gold. But the fairy was laughing, laughing too, the fairy was laughing too. With tiptoe step and beating heart, quite softly I drew nigh, and there was mischief in his merry face, and a twinkle in his eye. He hammered and sang and whistled a tune, and he drank his mountain dew, and I laughed to think he was caught at last. But the fairy was laughing, laughing too, the fairy was laughing too. Now, as quick as a thought, I seized the elf. Now, give me your gold, I cried. The crock, says he, is at your feet, and another one there at your side. And I turned to look, and the elf was gone. Then what was I to do? And I laughed to think what a fool I'd been. But the fairy was laughing, laughing too, the fairy was laughing too. Now you know I'm no John McCormick. And I'll give you a rough idea, very rough, of what you're up against.
It does that all right.
What else are you going to use?
Well, there's the banshee.
That's good, good.
The way I see it, she's the Old fairy lady that wails and carries on when somebody dies.
No, before. Before they die. She warns you about death before it happens. Oh, all the old Irish families have their banshees. The McCartys and the O'Sullivans and the O'Kellys and the Butlers and the Keatings. They have a book here. This is it, I think. It has an O'Brien banshee. Here it is. The Wail of the Banshee. Hark the banshee's plaintive crying, mourns the pride of all our race. Keenan for the young O'Brien, none can ever take his place. Home he rode upon the midnight through the wild impetuous storm, and his mother, watching, waiting, sees the banshee's fearful form. Hears the banshee's lonely Keenan, wildly wailing on the wind. No one can mistake her meaning. Death is thundering close behind. Swiftly on the midnight hour, o'er the black and gloomy heath, comes the fateful cost of hour, the relentless coach of death. Up his horse reared, vainly trying to escape the horrid sight. Through his master, left him lying dead upon that dark midnight. Hark the banshee's plaintive crying, mourns the pride of all our race. Keenan for the young O'Brien, none can ever take his place. Well, there you have it, Walt. Banshees, death, coaches, headless coachmen. Oh, the Irish love it all. Tell me, Walt, about those leprechauns. You're not going to try and draw them, are you?
Of course, why not?
Well, they have such a God bless you, devil take you look. I don't think an artist could capture that in 1,000 years.
Well, my artists have improved over the years. I'm quite sure they could capture all those moods.
But not at the same time. Now, let's face it, Walt. Only a leprechaun can play a leprechaun.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. Get yourself a real one.
You mean use midgets?
You don't get my meaning, Walt. Go and capture yourself a real live leprechaun.
Where?
In Ireland, where else?
Well, I'm afraid that'd be quite a chore, Pat.
Walt, you are a perfectionist. You want to do everything right.
Well, yes,
Now,
but...
you have a nimble mind. You go to Ireland. Learn something.
Well, no doubt I would, Pat, but all kidding aside now.
Kidding? What kidding?
Well, this business of capturing a leprechaun.
You think I'm pulling your leg, don't you? Well, you wouldn't if you'd known my Uncle Dennis. He surprised one of them. And the little fella made off so fast, he left this behind him. My uncle said it was still warm when he picked it up. My Uncle Dennis never told a lie. He's a very honorable man.
Well, I've always wanted to go to Ireland. So, what can I lose?
Nothing but your heart. Here's a bit of Gaelic for you. Follow August.
What's that mean?
Good hunting to you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Pat. And so, believing Pat O'Brien to be a very honorable man, I went Irish. Irish all the way. I even crossed the ocean in an Irish Airlines plane. In Dublin, my first thought was to consult the Irish scholars. So I visited a library devoted to folklore and found the old custodian very helpful indeed.
Now, all these, Mr. Disney, are part of a private collection left us by Lord de Cogan. And every volume records an encounter with the little people. So if I can't answer your questions, here are the books that can.
Well, do the books say how big a leprechaun may be?
Oh,
Well, could I carry one back in a shoebox? That is, if I cut air holes in the top.
Faith, I don't know. But here's a thing now that may give us a rough estimate. Now, these were sent in by a Mrs. McQuaid of County Cork.
A real leprechaun's coat.
Yes, surely.
And hat?
And hat. No doubt she was a bit careless where she threw her wash water. She found the wee jacket and cobbeen laid out on a furze bush to dry. There you are now. The man who wore them was just under 2 foot tall. You could easily carry him in your valise case.
My grandfather described them as knee-high to a mortal.
May God bless him for an honest man.
I don't suppose anybody ever sent in photographs.
No, but we've the next best thing to it. Now, these wood engravings go all the way back to 1826. They were made by an artist who lived with the leprechauns for 7 years.
7 years?
And a day. 7 years and a day. And this is the account they gave him of how they themselves came to live in Ireland.
You don't find them anywhere else?
No, nowhere else in the world at all. Their story is a kind of paradise lost and paradise regained, rolled into one. The little people are fallen angels, you know.
Is that so?
Oh, it is. It is indeed. But once before the beginning of time, they lived up above in heaven, peaceable and decent like you and me. And then Satan started a war against the angel Gabriel. And they all took sides, the black angels against the white. Now, on the morning of the great battle, Brian Connors, king of the little people, was lined up on the side of the white angels, while across the valley were the black forces of Satan. He had a tremendous advantage at first, by reason that he and his wicked lads could curse and call names to their heart's content, while the white angels had to bite their tongues for fear they'd utter blasphemy. Sure, you know yourself how hard it is to start a proper fight without it. But when the fighting began, the black angels never had a chance. It was an elegant sight to watch the angel Gabriel hurling rocks and hills at Satan, and to see the archangel Michael shine thunderbolts at him. But the little people were too small to lift a rock, let alone to throw one. So King Brian took the little people off the battlements and hid them under the gold steps of heaven until the Donnybrook had ended. And that was his undoing. For when the fight was over, Gabriel said to King Brian, "Brian," says he, "any man that won't stand up and fight for what he believes may not be deserving of hell, but he's not fit for heaven." So he turned them all out. But before he did so, he gave them one last favor. They could live among any kind of people they liked. "Well," says Brian, "we like people who are clean and clever and fond of dancing and singing, and we'd like to have them poor, for when a man gets rich, there's no fun in him at all. I know the very place for you," says Gabriel, "and I hope you find it. Now jump," says he. And they jumped. For 2 years they fell, until they reached the world. And when they had circled it round and round, they saw at last a beautiful, small little island, glimmering and sparkling and laughing in the middle of the sea. "Stop there," says King Brian, "for of all the places on earth, this place is the nearest like heaven." And they're still here today.
Where?
Well, it's hard to say. Civilization being what it is, they keep retreating further and further into the country.
I'd like to catch that king.
You'd be better to try your skill on one of the little shoemakers first.
Well, I believe in starting at the top.
Well, we do occasionally hear about King Brian. The last report came in from County Kerry. There's an old Shanachie there who...
Shanachie?
A traditional storyteller. This one's very good, I believe.
And where would I find him?
In the town of Rathcullen.
Rathcullen.
Rathcullen. His name is Darby O'Gill.
Darby O'Gill.
He'll tell you about King Brian if anybody can.
Well, thank you.
It's just one thing to remember, Mr. Disney.
And what's that?
Whatever he tells you, it's true.
journey to Rathcullen was only 150 miles, but it took all day. I found Rathcullen to be a pretty little village hidden far back among the hills. The old Shanaky's house was on the edge of town. That night, beside his fire, I had the pleasure of hearing Darby O'Gill tell one of his many adventures about the little people.
Now, for the benefit of any strangers who may be present, let me point out that the most tricky and deceitful creature alive is the leprechaun. Did I ever tell you about the time I met with King Brian in the big field when I was cutting the turf? Well, I was after gathering 2 creelfuls and pausing for breath when I spied him under the white thorn bush. And before you could bless yourself, I had him. Ha, 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 ha! Oh, death alive, he was an angry little man. Take your eye off me, you murdering robber, says he. What'll you give me, says I, to buy your freedom? The cross of gold, says he. Dig under the ragweed bush at your feet. Then he was gone. But there were 3 thundering big crockfuls of shining golden guineas. I knew I never could carry them all, or even getting them out of the ground without a spade. So I took up my red choker and I tied it to the ragweed bush. And I covered them over. And I ran home for the wheelbarrow. Then I come back, and lo and behold, every ragweed bush in that big field had a red choker, the identical model of me own. Faith, there was more chokers waving on the breeze than there is red petticoats from Sligo to Tralee.
Well, didn't you do any digging at all?
For 2 days and 2 nights I dug and I dug. But there was more than 40 good Irish acres in that field. And after a while I had to give it up.
Is that the last time you saw King Brian?
No, indeed. I saw him last summer, up in the old ruins on the top of Knocknashiga.
Knocknashiga?
That's a fairy mountain, you know. That's where they all live. I could tell him a queer tale about that.
Could you take me there?
Well, maybe I could.
And take me he did that very night. Though it was a hard climb to the top, Darby showed me his heels all the way. The trail was rough, and I was thankful that the moon was strong. The fairy mountain was so mysterious, I felt that anything could happen in such a place.
This is where I saw him. The identical self-same place.
What do we do now?
We wait.
How long?
As long as it takes. You're in Ireland now, Mr. Disney. We make our own time here.
What is it?
Can't you hear them?
No, I hear nothing.
Can't you hear them keeping still? they go. King Brian's lieutenant. He's easy to catch. How? With the eye.
Like this.
They can't escape as long as you don't look away. Go on.
This is an outrageous outrage.
Good lad, good lad. You got him fair and square. Now he must give you a wish.
And what would that be?
I have only one wish. I want to talk to King Brian.
I'll not betray the king, but I'll give you something better. Take this, and be gone.
Well, would you look at that?
I don't want the gold.
You know, did he say he didn't want the gold?
You don't want the gold.
I want to see King Brian.
What a price to pay. I suppose you may give him his wish. Will you tell the king?
I will. If he takes his eyes off me.
It's all right now, Mr. Disney.
You don't think it's a trick, maybe, just to get away?
No, trick of the R and deceit for the B. But then we go back on the word.
Darby O'Gill. Darby O'Gill. What class of deceitful trickery are you up to this time?
Good evening, Your Honor. I brought a Mr. Disney here to see you, sir.
Disney? I know the Dailies, the Duffys, the Donovans, the Devlins, the Dooleys, the Dardys, but Disney, no. I don't know any Disney, so good night, sir.
Your Majesty, nevertheless, I am half Irish.
Mr. Disney has come all those millions of miles from America to see you, sir.
Yeah, and I come all the way up from the middle of the mountain to have a look at him. What's this I hear about him not wanting the gold? Is it a new trick, maybe?
No, sir. It's no trick.
But it isn't human. I've never heard of a mortal man refusing our gold.
It's you I want to see. You see, I'm making a film about Ireland, the real thing.
What's that got to do with me?
I want you in it.
Murder and turf! Is it mad you are, man, or what?
He's wonderful. The gold crown, the red beard. Your Majesty, will you turn around and let me have a look at your profile?
Sean Connery! Have you never seen a mortal immortal before?
Well, I've seen engravings of you, but they don't do you justice. I always visualized you with a long white beard, and you were living in a cave.
In a cave, says he. Did you ever hear such ignorance?
No, he's an American, you know. Oh, it's not ignorance. It's just that he knows nothing. Oh, you want to see where he lives? His throne room's as big as a church, and the whole place is rotten with gold.
As Darby described his own first visit.
No, I'm no great hand with a harp. But give me old fiddle, and I'd play you a tune.
That must have been a wonderful sight.
Ah, it was grand. I never played the fiddle better in me life.
What were you doing there?
Oh, I was, paying me best respects.
He was there because I put the committal on him. He didn't even know it. He thought he was there of his own free will.
But I escaped from my own free will.
Ha ha! I let him go.
It's not true, Mr. Disney.
It is
When
true.
it was all over, it was I that kept him. I knew his weakness and I played on to it.
Hold your wish.
As they argued, I began to realize these two old men were friendly enemies from way back. They told me story after story of outwitting each other. Like,
I had mercy on the poor little man.
after all that ruckus, you can still be friends?
We've always been friends.
Who said we were not?
Well, I thought from the way you were shouting at each other that...
Faith, lad, there's nothing unfriendly in a little difference of opinion.
Nothing at all. Although I will admit, there was one time I was so angry with this old bag of bones that I was ready to hang a quarter of him from every beam in his barn.
But that's all in the past.
Aye, I suppose we'll never fall out again.
It's not likely. Aye.
That isn't all there is to the story, is it?
It's not half of it.
Oh, should it take all night to tell it?
Aye.
Tell me, lad, what did you come here to see me about?
Do you not remember? He wants to put you in a film.
And you too.
Me.
Why not? You tell me the rest of your adventures, we'll put it on film, and you both can play the part to the life.
Me a film actor.
Him a film actor. He wouldn't be worth a tinker's curse.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
When it comes to play acting, I got extra legs of you.
With them wobbly old pins? What would you do if they asked you to dance?
I could double it or treble it with you.
What would you do for a face?
I wouldn't have to hide it behind a red thatch.
What does that signify?
It signifies that I should be a better film actor than you.
Would you care to prove it?
I would so.
Then I dare you.
I double dare you, gliggering little franny.
How's your wish, you
Hold me, what I hold up.
I couldn't wait to tell Pat O'Brien about the good hunting I'd had. So as soon as I returned to America, I paid him another visit.
Sit down, Walt.
Thanks, Pat. And thanks again.
For what?
Well, I found them.
Found who?
The leprechauns.
Oh, that's right. I've been reading. You've been to Ireland, haven't you?
Well, have you forgotten? You sent me there.
That I did, indeed.
Now, you won't believe this, but I did just what you told me to do.
Don't tell me you captured a live leprechaun.
The king of the leprechauns, King Brian himself from Knockdashiga.
Oh, sure, the king. I might have known it'd be the king.
And we got to be very good friends.
I suppose he'd be playing one of the parts, too.
Just as you said it should be. And on top of that, he's going to loan me all the other leprechauns I might need.
Sure, sure. I suppose he offered the crocks of gold so he could finance the picture.
He did, but I said no. I turned him down.
Oh, you did. You poor, foolish man. You have a cigar.
No, thanks. But I got something far better than the crocks of gold.
You have?
A real Irish story.
Well, what is it?
Well, I'm tearing up the other script, and I'm starting all over, and I'm going to play out the adventures of these two characters, King Brian and Darby O'Gill.
Who's Darby O'Gill?
Oh, he's a grand old man from Rathcullen. He's going to act in the picture, too, opposite King Brian.
Whole thing dropped right in your lap, huh?
Yes, sir. You see, these two old codgers had been rivals for years, matching wits with each other. And it finally worked out that Darby captured the king and put him in a sack. And he wouldn't let him out till King Brian gave him his 3 wishes. Well, Darby used his first wish, wishing that the king wouldn't take advantage of his magic powers to escape. Then Darby really had him. So then it was up to the king to trick Darby into wishing the other 2. Well, one night, Michael McBride, the young gamekeeper, saw Darby with a game bag over his shoulder.
Sure. Sure, that's the way they do it. They trick you by changing shapes. Oh, that sounds like the real thing, Walt.
Well, it should. It's the true story of their lives.
Yeah, I know. Those 2 old men, they sound grand. What are you going to do for romance?
Well, it so happens that Darby has a daughter, Katie. She's at that age when they have to be handled with kid gloves. She's young, you know, and she likes to go to all the dances and have all the boys in love with her. Well, so happens that Darby...
I know. They lived happily ever after, and they made Darby a grandfather 7 times over.
No, it wasn't quite that easy. You see, the kiss didn't end the story. It just began it.
How do you mean?
Well, you remember you told me that the banshee always wails before someone's going to die?
Yeah?
Well, the banshee wailed for Katie. But Darby just couldn't let her be taken.
So they didn't live happily ever after.
Oh, yes, they did.
How'd you work it out?
Well, I didn't. The king did.
What could you be after telling me?
Well, not today. It would take too long. But I'm glad you asked because it shows you must like the story.
Oh, I do, Walt. But there's one thing lacking. If you want to make a good Irish story, you can't do it without a Donnybrook.
Oh, but Pat, I have a Donnybrook.
Now you have. I suppose the king gave you that idea, too.
Well, you might say he was the excuse for it. You see, it happened in the pub one day when the town bully was sounding off about the little people.
I've heard enough silly blather about little people to last me a lifetime.
What kind of man are you at all that doesn't believe in the little people?
Maybe you'd like to find out.
Walt, that's a dilly. Now you have a real picture. There's one thing that bothers me. When you start to draw in the little people.
Draw them? Pat, I told you I have King Brian and all the leprechauns I can possibly use.
Oh, now look, Walt. Fun is fun.
But, Pat, you're the one that told me to go to Ireland. In fact, when I told King Brian you'd sent me, he asked me to bring this back to you.
What is it?
Well, it's King Brian's own personal writing crop, inscribed to you in Gaelic.
Gaelic? To Padraig O'Brien, for his unwavering belief in the little people. From Brian, King of Nashika. Walt, do you mean to tell me that the little people themselves, King Brian himself in person, will appear in the picture?
You promised me.
This I've got to see.